Hello and welcome to Speaking Out on Financial Abuse, stories of survival and hope after financial abuse in a marriage or romantic partnership. I'm your host, Lori G. And what does it look like on a daily basis to be married to a financially abusive deadbeat? Today, I'm excited to welcome survivor, author, energy practitioner, and well-being retreat host, Rebecca Lazzelle. Rebecca has a brand new book releasing in July about her marriage of domestic violence called What the F Was That? Rebecca's going to share her story of a financially abusive marriage, which ultimately led to violence, as well as discuss her new book and her mission to help others recover from relationship trauma. Rebecca, we're all ears to hear your story. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Lori. I'm excited to be here.
So, where in the world are you now, and where are you originally from?
Currently, I am based outside of Denver, Colorado, which is beautiful right now. We've got like a serious drought situation, which if you've ever been to Colorado, you know it's really dry here, but it's a bit crazy. But I'm originally from the East Coast.
So what was money like growing up for you? What was your family structure and money like then?
I think it's an interesting question because I don't know that it's something that kids really pay attention to. And when you have conversations with your parents later on, you're like, I had no idea. My parents divorced when I was right around 8. And we were in Colorado at the time. My mom was a teacher, and we all know how well teachers are paid. So there was that dynamic in the 90s. And as I got older, I learned that my dad paid child support and my dad paid alimony. And I would say in the last 10 or 15 years, my mom communicated to me that we would have not lived the life that we had without that financial support. Single mom with 2 kids in the education space. I didn't think we were poor. There were definitely kids growing up who had more money, but it wasn't ever something where I didn't get to do sports or I didn't get to do a school-related activity because there wasn't any money. So it was normal, middle-class, suburban situation. Insurance was important and life insurance was important and savings was important. We had these little piggy banks where we would get allowance and you would sum in your savings and put some in a donation and then, you can spend the rest kind of the way that you want. So I did grow up with a little bit of financial acumen, but because my parents were separated and I didn't know about child support and alimony until I was well into adulthood. It just all kind of felt normal.
So you grew up with your mom and support from your dad. Before we get into what you have created now with this business, which is really, really interesting, what you are doing to help survivors of trauma, specifically types of betrayal trauma, and also you're an author, you have a new book coming out next month. Where can we go back to the beginning? Sounds like stable upbringing. Where did it go from that to, I'm assuming your mission that you have now came out of this marriage or relationship that we're going to talk about today. Yeah. Where did that start for you? Where did you meet the individual that we're going to talk about today?
So I think from a financial perspective, it is worth noting that when I went to college, my parents didn't pay for anything. I took out loans. There was a certain amount of accountability and responsibility with that. I didn't really get any meaningful scholarships when I was in college, and I just kind of went anyway. And then I was actually married once before, and there's a lot of similarities in those two relationships.
That's not unusual.
Both of my exes did not graduate high school. And I'm not judging from any certain perspective. It's just worth noting that is a fact with both of those men. And so in my first marriage, he actually wasn't even from this country. So he came here. He could not work when he first got here because he wasn't legally here. Like he had to get his social security number and like all that kind of stuff after we got married. And he was a laborer. He worked with his hands. He was a handyman. And I financially supported that relationship. And every time that he did not have a job or when he was not working and he was studying to get his GED, for example, I supported all of that. And I was under some sort of impression that you had a joint account when you were married. And that's just what you did. And all the money, 100% of the money went into there and everything got paid out of there. And that way, when the other person didn't work that week or that month or whatever, there was like still money. And that's just kind of how it worked. And we never really talked about money. We fought about it. We fought about money, but we never really talked about money and how it was working for us. And
like who's paying for what? Do you plan to pay for anything in the near future? Yeah.
Exactly. So then that relationship ended up after 10 years, we got a divorce and it was relatively amicable, especially considering now that I'd gone through a second divorce that was not amicable. And I came into this new relationship relatively quickly. I'd been separated from my ex for about 3 months before I found my new partner. We had known each other for 25 years, so there was a different dynamic and trust and knowledge and understanding of sort of where we were and who we were because of that longstanding relationship from a distance, but still friendship. And it started off where he had a job, and he'd had a job for a couple of years, and it was not the highest paying, but it was very stable. And within a few months of us starting our relationship and dating, he quit that job and he moved. And he started dabbling with small businesses all over the place. But it was something that I was like, he's trying. I don't know. I don't even remember really even justifying what he was doing or even thinking about it. I was probably just infatuated and in early love that I just didn't even pay attention.
Did you have any children when you divorced your first husband and married your second, or were you by yourself?
I did not. I don't have any children currently. And I would say with what has happened in my recent relationship, I could not thank the universe even more, even though we tried for 4 years and it was very hard. Like he had a kid.
And how old was the child?
Maybe 10 turning 11. And so about 6 or 8 months after dating, I moved to also be where he was because I could work remote. And I was like, might as well. This was in like 2018, well before COVID and working remote. I did have to like drive to and from Denver pretty frequently, which was a lot. It's like 2-hour round trip. And then we moved in together about 6 months after that. And the relationship kind of was just progressing. And I just did the same thing. We moved in together. We didn't have this kind of regular work. And I was like, well, let's just have joint finances because that's what you do. We combined our bank account actually to his bank account. And hindsight's 2020, but I didn't even think about it at the time.
So the bank account was only in his name?
Initially, yeah. And then shortly after we added my name, but he was primary and I was added on. So it became a joint account relatively quickly, but it was his account in his bank.
So when you met him and things got serious, did he quit his job before you said I do or after you said I do?
So we did move in together about 18 months before we got married.
Whose place did you move into?
So we moved into a new apartment. So it wasn't an apartment that I was renting. He also had a medical bankruptcy that was only a few years old and his credit score was in a toilet. So the apartment and then the future house was all in my name because he couldn't be on those documents because his credit score was so low. Like he was living there and not financially responsible. When we ended up buying a house, before we got married, I ended up buying a house. I was the only one who could put my name on any of the documents as well, because again, he still had the bankruptcy. His credit score was like below 600. So it did not make any sense.
Okay, so let me recap. He, when you met him, had gone through a bankruptcy and had a very bad credit. He had a relationship with somebody who has a child, a little girl, and he gets an apartment that he actually can't be on the lease for because he has bad credit. Also, he quit his job, so he doesn't have any income except, sounds like maybe sporadic income from places. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
So when you say you moved in together, what you mean is your name is on the lease. So you're 100% responsible for 100% of everything. And you are also paying the lease because how is he doing financially at this point when you move in together?
This was not something I paid attention to because I didn't even realize what was happening. But it was inconsistency in his income was a common theme throughout our marriage. Eventually, when we went to counseling, the word consistency with income was always a problem. He would have a month where he'd be fine. And then he's like, well, we're fine now. And I'm like, well, okay, like we can pay all the bills this month, but what about next month? And making money this month doesn't mean that having no money next month isn't a problem. Relatively inconsistent from the beginning. He didn't have any interest or desire to own the financial aspect of the relationship, own the management of the finances. So 100% of my first relationship and my second relationship, both of those marriages, was me managing the finances. So me owning the credit cards, putting both of them on credit cards that I was the main person. They were just authorized users. Looking at credit card statements, me looking at income coming in and trying to create budgets. And I like spreadsheets. So it was always me owning that aspect, and in both cases being the primary responsibility and the primary earner in the relationship.
Especially your second husband. The way you know someone is a financial abuser, the deadbeat, is when they believe that their critical self-support is optional. not mandatory. They know that having the lights on is mandatory, but it's not their mandatory. It's your mandatory. I don't know where that comes from with some people, because I have been through the exact same experience where your self-support just is not your responsibility. And they can be highly manipulative. In fact, you can see how serious of a situation you are now in.
Yeah. And I think I'll just say when you reached out to me, I was like, that's not applicable to me. I didn't have financial abuse in my relationship. And then I went to your website and I was like, I can kind of check some things off that checklist. And then we had the prep call for this. And I was like, whole other side of this whole issue that I don't cover in my book at all as part of the domestic violence relationship or the healing, because I just literally had no idea until 2 weeks ago that I experienced. And so it's wild. It's totally wild.
And that's a whole different side of trauma that can be so long lasting. It's a real revelation when you realize that coercive control is the operative term for financial abuse, because you didn't even realize you're not just taking on the responsibility of someone's food and water and clothing. You're not seeing even the money go out the door with that, but you're taking liability for this person as well. I think you're lucky, unless you tell me otherwise. I think you're lucky that he didn't end up in jail or you didn't end up sued because he was driving your car. So he's unemployed. You move in together. Your name is on the lease. How are things going at first?
Let's be clear. He always advertised himself as self-employed. I work for myself. I have this business. I do this thing. And so we never use that term unemployed, which I think is also an interesting point that you bring up. And I saw myself as supporting his dream. He's this huge dreamer. He has all these visions. I've told people before that I literally was down here on the ground holding a very teeny tiny thread, keeping him tethered to the ground because he was just out there with these big, huge ideas all the time, this visionary. And so I saw myself as, okay, well, I'm supporting your dreams. You want to create this new business, this like handyman business, like, okay, cool. It's going to be hard the first couple of months because you have to do marketing and all this kind of stuff. Okay, that's not working out. You want to try this other thing? Like, okay, cool. That's not working out. You go get a job. You have 2 offers. We're talking about the benefits of each offer. You take one of the offers and then you get fired 8 weeks later. There were multiple instances where he got more of a like traditional job with like hours and 90 days to benefits and things like that. And then he would get fired or he would quit. There's always an excuse of some kind. This doesn't work for us. They treated me poorly. I remember one of the jobs was like a salesperson for the company that sells Roundup. And he even went on like a work trip 2 weeks later. I can't even remember why, but always this kind of turnover with these periods of no work whatsoever. And it just became a constant thing. And by the time we were married, this was just sort of the cycle that we were in. And we started couples counseling, not for pre-marriage, but just right prior to the wedding, because that was when some of the things were coming out. Hindsight's 2020. If I'd have told any of my friends about what happened 3 weeks before the wedding, they would have been like, get out.
What were you thinking at that time? You're getting married. You're literally saying I do. So marriage must mean something to you in terms of commitment. It sounds like you had a traditional idea about finances and who's the head of the household, but you're already in counseling. Obviously, we can all see around the world. I mean, people in Iceland right now listening know that you're headed towards some trouble, girl. But what were you thinking at the time about this guy?
I'm an eternal optimist. I am a glass half full person just by nature. That changed for a little while in my life after this whole stuff with my ex. But generally, I see the good in people. And I honestly, truly said, wow, nothing like this has ever happened in our relationship. This is a crazy way to express anger that I have not equipped to deal with. And there's obviously something going on here. But the month before your wedding, everyone's nerves are a little bit frazzled, whatever. And so it was easy for me to justify based on cultural norms and it being like a one-off, him admittedly even saying, oh my God, I just had this horrible week. And you're just kind of normalizing this crazy incident that we had. And I just said, we need some tools, obviously. And relationships take work. I'm not this person that believes it's all just sunshine and rainbows all the time. And I was like, okay, like obviously we do not have the tools to work on this together. So we just need the tools. I love counseling. I'm a therapy pusher. I'm an extrovert. I process verbally. For me, I'm like, counseling is just what you do. But we spent 5 days apart, 3 weeks before our wedding. That's how serious. I knew deep down, because that's why you don't tell people, because deep down, you know. and you're lying by omission. But I was just like, no, I love him so much. I love this guy across incarnations and timelines and lifetimes. And this is the guy. This is my guy. This is my end all be all, get gray, till we die, dude. Right. And so it just was kind of like, oh, well, there's this like little bump. It's way bigger than any other bump in any relationship I'd ever had. But I was, okay, we deserve to be able to try to work.
You are perfectly describing betrayal blindness. Perfectly describing betrayal blindness. And
Yes.
I can think of many examples in my history where I just flat out turned my head and looked the other way.
Gaslighting almost, like, it wasn't that bad.
That's a great way of putting it, self-gaslighting. And it's just right in front of you, especially when you're monetarily in charge of everything, because at the end of the month, frankly, it's all about you. You are completely alone in that. You must have felt alone in both of those marriages because of the fact that financially you were alone.
I pride myself on being an independent woman who makes it for herself, who has this crazy career that she's like moving towards up the ladder. She's doing all the things. And I was just kind of like, you know what? This is who I am. I don't mind working the career ladder that I'm excited and thrilled about. And if that means that I'm in a position to be able to support the dreams of my husband, like, I love that. What a cool position for me to be in.
Nobody goes into a marriage, usually anyway, expecting things to go badly. So when did this start to hit the fan for you?
So he had some mental health issues, which I do talk about a little bit more specifically in the book. That is what was showing up right before the wedding, but I didn't know. He wasn't admitting to it. He didn't tell me. He really didn't tell me about the mental health issues until 4 months after the wedding, 4 or 5 months after the wedding. And at that point, I was like, well, we're in therapy. This is good. My naive, lust-filled soul was like, we can't get worse from here, right? Because bringing out into the open this issue of mental health now means we're at rock bottom.
This is before your wedding. You're saying, well, there's nowhere to go but up from here.
Exactly. So that was not true, but I didn't know that at the time. I also had very, very no experience with an intimate partner who had severe mental health problems. And so this mental health, substance abuse, complicated web that then these cycles sort of got escalated. And they sort of escalated and got worse. And we were in therapy for a very long time together. And then we were like, oh, this therapist isn't working. Like, let's try a new one. And I totally understand that you grow out of therapists or modalities or whatever. Finances was something that I was always trying to bring up. I always was talking to my own personal therapist. I want to talk about the budget. I want to talk about, I paid your child support for the last 4 months because you haven't been working. And even though I didn't...
Whoa, stop right there. Child support. That's right. He's got a child. When did you start paying his child support and why?
It was random because of this inconsistent work. And so we didn't track it, and we had a joint account where, 90% of my money went. It was impossible for me to say categorically, I paid your child support, because it was a joint account where there was money in there. And I wasn't budgeting from the perspective of, you only put in XYZ this month and that paid for these. We didn't allocate expenses one to the other. I didn't even say something like, I'll pay 60, you pay 40%. Like, we never had any of those conversations. It was just like, all the money is in one pot and we're just paying there.
So you're an ATM. You're basically his human ATM. In other words, you never had a discussion with him and said, okay, I'm going to have to pay your child support, or he's saying you need to pay my child support. He just literally took the money every month, and the two of you had no discussion at all about it.
Same with the collections agencies, that he came with collections bills. And it was the same thing. I was under some sort of blind assumption that this joint finances with no conversation was how it worked, because you were a partnership and like everything was together. And honestly, I still don't really know where that came from. I never even asked my parents, did you have a joint bank account? And now I'm like, I'm never having a joint bank account again. Like, not that way, at least. So it was just this thing of unspoken understanding. All right, you didn't bring in any money this month, so I paid your collections and I paid your child support, but I never talked about it. And I do vividly remember after this 4-month period where it was like, all right, this is when I was trying to talk to my counselor. Like, I'm not mad. I just want to have an open and honest conversation about this inconsistent work and the fact that I am paying your bills and we're not talking about it. And so slowly over time, my desire to actually split up our finances really solidified in my head. And so right around this time he went to rehab, I had decided I want to try to figure out how to have a conversation with him about splitting up our finances and only putting a certain amount in this joint account based on bills. And this was after talking with a financial advisor, but also a lot of my married friends who were like, what the hell? We don't run our finances like this. And me, finally, what am I running finances like this? This is crazy.
Did you hide from any friends or family what his financial status was? Did your friends and family know that this guy didn't work at anything? What did they know? I swear we married the same guy. I kept that from my family at all costs. And it was at all costs because I was the only one paying for anything. And it sounds like you probably didn't tell them what the deal was.
I don't think anyone knew about the bankruptcy. Maybe like my sister and my mom. I would say that I embellished his work situation by saying that he was self-employed and he was always starting a new thing. And so it was justified. He just started his business, so he doesn't have any clients. Or he just switched from handyman to painting. Or it's the low season because it's wintertime and it's snowing outside now and it's handyman stuff. Always a viable reason for him to be having an inconsistent.
If all else fails, you can always use the old school one. I used to use that one. Oh, he's going to school. Well, he's going to be going to school.
Getting certified in this new thing. Yes, we did that. We did that.
And they stop asking questions because actually he's going full time. Just whatever you can to stop people from asking questions because you don't want people to know you're basically married to a deadbeat.
And those things were true for sure. But I was still trying to figure out how to have an actual financial conversation with him about numbers and not emotions. You're not providing without saying that.
The problem with guys like that is it is true, but for about a second. It's true today that he's in school. He started this new job.
He started a new job.
Nah.
And then I think it played into the mental health. And he would have these cycles of failure and shame and not providing. And then I would feel guilty for having that thought of, well, you need to provide more.
That's exactly why they do it.
But we weren't okay. We were $25,000 in maxed out credit card debt. And I literally was like, how did we even get here? We should be fine with the budgets that I'm putting together. And I still to this day cannot really explain where the money went. One time after counseling, we even came up with this rule. Well, I say we, but apparently it was me. I thought we had said any expense over $100 for the next 3 months, we're just going to call in and check with each other. And then I'm going to check the bank account. I'm going to check the things. We're going to talk about what it is we're spending money on just to make sure that this is something we need to spend money on. And so we can just get a better understanding of how often are we spending more than $100 in one transaction. We agreed Costco was the one exception because who spends less than $100 at Costco? I have no idea.
You keep saying we, and I'm curious about that.
The impression that we did this together in counseling. And then 2 weeks later, there's $100+ charges on the credit card from him. And he never called me. And he said, I don't need to ask permission. Is that what this is? Now I feel like I'm being gaslit a little bit. I thought we agreed on this together in counseling. And he says, we didn't agree on this. This is a rule you made up. Did I do that? Did I make up this rule? And he didn't actually agree. And then there's no evidence either way to say that I'm remembering incorrectly and he's remembering correctly. And so I'm like, well, maybe I was controlling and saying we must do this. And he actually didn't agree. And I dismissed him.
So your counselor was fully aware that this spouse was not working, not being supported financially. He or she was aware of all of that.
Yeah.
So honestly, the punchline here is you sat in front of a licensed qualified counselor who heard in detail what should have been immediately identified as domestic violence. You should have been told day one of that counseling appointment, as I should have been multiple times. This is domestic violence. And this could actually destroy your life if, in fact, you are bankrupted, you are financially ruined for the next 10, 20 years.
Right.
So you were failed in support. Because that should have been clear. When a domestic violence issue can be downgraded into an emotional issue, the victim has lost. You had lost with that counselor. Don't you feel that? Maybe you lost from day one because that counselor was treating your situation with this man financially as an emotional issue, as a relationship issue. Why don't you try to have a meeting together? No, this is domestic violence. This is coercive control. This leads to violence and death. that. And I know that your book certainly proves that this is where it leads. So looking back at this, when you got to the point where this is disintegrating and counseling is not helping, where were you at that point? What made you decide you were going to leave?
I didn't. So in 2023, we were kind of like, we've tried counseling for years. Nothing is working. As I mentioned, this complex web exists between your mental health and your substance use. Like, what about rehab? Because I don't know what else to do.
What was his issue with substance abuse?
When he went into these mental health cycles, he would drink to excess and smoke a lot of weed. And it was the chicken and the egg. It was impossible to tell if he went into these mental health cycles because he was already drinking more and smoking more, or if he was smoking more and drinking more because of his mental health. Like, it was so intertwined from the outside, I could not see. We drank a lot. When I stopped drinking for 3 months, I finally realized how much we were drinking because I wasn't really drinking anymore. So that was an interesting perspective change. But we agreed, we'd use the D word, that this is going to end in divorce if we don't figure this out. And I love you in all my lifetimes. Like, we have to figure this out. So we were like, all right, let's try rehab.
For him, you mean?
Yeah. So around the same time of rehab is when we were in this maxed out credit card situation. And I had a written agreement how much they were going to charge me in cash, even if the insurance ended up not covering it. It was 30 days inpatient rehab. It ended up not being covered by insurance, but because I had a written agreement about how much I had to pay, I was in the clear because it was well over $100,000.
For 30 days?
Yeah, it was a private. I felt really good about it because they advertised this mental health first approach rather than just substances. And I really was like, this is where it's at. And it was private and basically did it like a vacation, opted out of every optional activity as part of the rehab, which it was a little bit hard to accept, but I did a lot of discovery at the time. When he came out of rehab, he said, I want to be sober for a while. And I was like, great. And then that didn't last. And I was still sticking with it.
Well, let's try this. And then maybe we need to try that.
We didn't do this. And it became this, I'm wanting to exhaust all of those options. I don't want to give up. And I did the same thing with my first marriage. We were in different counselors. It took 4 years from the first time we talked about divorce until we got divorced. And at that point, I literally was not even emotional about it because we literally tried every avenue and nothing worked. So there's nothing left except to not be together anymore. Still trying to have kids, multiple surgeries on his side, surgeries on my side, all kinds of tools and books about ovulation and all of that. And this dream of wanting to stay together, but not understanding what was happening with the relationship. And then he ended it. It all ended. And I do go into detail. There's a trigger warning at the beginning of the book, but I do go into detail about that night that ended our relationship. He knew deep down that we needed to divorce each other, but that I wasn't going to be the one to pull away for probably another couple of years because I hadn't exhausted every option in like what I thought was the available toolkit. And so he got on substances and we had this crazy night. And that night I said, we're getting a divorce now, which is probably not a really great thing to be telling somebody when they're
unstable.
I truly believe that we probably wouldn't have lasted had that not happened, but it would have probably taken me another 2 years, finally figure it out and to finally be able to pull the plug on my own if something like this wouldn't have happened in those 2 years. But it wasn't me. Even that night, I'm like, what is happening to my life now? And it ended up being a consequence of his actions.
So you get a divorce, and here's where we start talking about your book. What the F was that? What happened after your divorce? You felt your life just collapsed.
So we actually did not get divorced right away. The domestic violence incident happened in October, and we didn't actually sign our divorce paperwork until June. And part of that was because I was so broken after what happened. And I talk a lot about my healing journey and just what it looked like in the very beginning, which was like a ashen wasteland from a volcano erupting to finally figuring out who I was. I needed to get a lawyer because I filed for divorce. We had a protection order, so we couldn't really communicate in the sort of standard way, but he did not sign the paperwork. So I had to file the one-sided divorce, which meant we had to have a meeting about it. So I called the court and I said, hey, we have a protection order. We can't be on the same call. We can't be in the same room. And they were like, oh, well, the courtroom is neutral territory. You have to be here. And I said, what? This is a domestic violence case. That's why we have this protection order. And she said, yeah, we understand. You still have to be here. So I had to get a lawyer because I just couldn't do it on my own. And that lawyer was very helpful. He was asking for thousands and thousands of dollars years. And while we had a prenup, it did not protect me from his alimony requests and those types of things. So it took a while, and the lawyer was very helpful. And we did finally come to an agreement where I paid him more than I paid my first husband in our divorce settlement as well. So I now have paid both of my husbands, but I was also very grateful not to be in a situation with alimony where I had to have some kind of sustained connection. So one lump sum was all happening as I was working on my mental health recovery, which is multiple detailed chapters in my book as a result of my life completely falling apart after.
So how did that lead to this mission you have, help others recover from the types of trauma that you went through in your divorce and your relationships?
I think I experienced a couple of physical health issues where Western medicine was, there's nothing wrong with you. It's psychosomatic. Doctors telling you like that pain you've had in your back for 5 years, there's no reason for it. Also, my severe gluten intolerance after decades of having the symptoms I had with that, which include fainting, which is a very strange one for gluten intolerance. And I was kind of like all these physical things, but I have never felt such an aloneness as I did after my incident with my ex. And I use the word aloneness purposefully rather than loneliness, because loneliness to me implies an understanding of being outside of other people or a community. And I literally felt like I was on a planet by myself and that there was no one around. There was such a disconnection from other people. And I want to do everything in my power to make sure that someone out there never feels like they are alone. Because the statistics for domestic violence in the US is like 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will experience this in their life. You're not alone when the statistics are 25 to 33% of people, but we feel alone because we don't talk about it. We don't want to trauma dump on people. And so part of what I'm doing with my packages and the way that I work is creating community and creating cohorts of people that work through a transformation together and retreats where people come together, because you are not alone. And while you are unique and your situation doesn't mean you are alone. And it doesn't mean that there aren't people out there that haven't gone through something so similar that they could relate. And there were no resources given to me by the police, by the courts. I asked my therapist at the time, there must be groups. There must be a group somewhere. There is nothing here. There's nothing here in this small town. And I want to do everything that I can to support people with their trauma, which is more than just talk therapy and goes really well with talk therapy, but also in creating community around this so that people don't feel alone.
Tell us a little bit about this business you developed from that.
So I got certified as an emotion code and a body code energy practitioner. It's not like Reiki. A lot of people are familiar with Reiki from an energy work perspective, that practitioner can kind of channel, move around healing energy and kind of do things with your energy body. But emotion code and body code is a little bit more specific. You're like, oh, okay, well, I've had this neck discomfort for a long time or this jaw discomfort. And we're like, okay, well, let's see what in your body, what in your trauma human experience could be building up over time, unprocessed energies, unprocessed traumas, unprocessed emotions, where kind of stacks up. And as adults, we do this. We forcibly do not process our emotions by saying things like, I don't have time to deal with this right now. That's the hallmark of I will deal with this later. And it's like, when is later? And later never comes. And those things kind of stack onto each other. And doctors like Gabor Mate have written in The Myth of Normal, those stacked up things can eventually physically manifest in issues. And so I work with this modality to break down those walls and those barriers and those things to open up people to connect with their true selves, to release physical discomforts that they might have. And it goes so well alongside traditional therapies. And a lot of those therapies are working on conscious, what you can remember, what you know happened. But this energy works on your subconscious, which is a record of everything that has ever happened to you that you've ever seen, heard, touched, felt, even things that you didn't consciously register at the time. And so working with both of those parts of your mind at the same time can have a huge impact on healing. And these energy modalities make up a big part of my healing journey. And I talk a lot about them in book.
You've written a memoir that is going to be released in July. It takes a lot of bravery, I think, for any domestic violence survivor to tell the public about their story. So tell us, what's it called, and tell us what it's about.
It is called What the Fuck Was That? It is a memoir of betrayal and reclaiming myself. So it does really outline a lot of these things that happened in the relationship, the grief that I experienced, the fact that if it had been all bad, I would have gone away long before that, but it wasn't. It was like Mount Everest and the Mariana Trench.
Well, you are awesome. And I'm very excited that you have this book coming out next month. And also, the audience had the privilege of hearing aspects of your marriage that directly involve financial abuse. Nobody told you that you were under domestic violence. I am really grateful to have had you on the show today. And I am going to put all of her links down below. Take a look and learn more about what Rebecca's doing. And also, her book will be available, I believe, on all the major channels like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Borders. And I will put links for that also, as well as her podcast. And again, Rebecca, thank you so much for appearing. And I hope you stay in touch with us.
Thank you so much, Lori. I really appreciate it. I had a great time.
And you've been listening to Speaking Out on Financial Abuse.